He is described by Gilbert and Guber as Catherine's alter ego, or ID, and contrasted in his darkness with the blonde Edgar, who presides over the Grange, Grange, which is presented, however ironically, as heaven, society and reason. This is a conflicting of racial otherness with the irrational forces of the id, or the subconscious which might be thought insensitive. Should we in general try to become super readers with multiple layers of sympathy and awareness, or will trying to do so merely produce blandness and superficiality? Obviously, it is impossible for anybody to answer this question for anybody else. My own feeling is that while an even spread of awareness across all these issues is theoretically possible, in practice, aiming for this merely in the interests of political correctness is almost bound to produce superficiality. A genuine interest in one of these issues can really only arise from, page 192, aspects of your own circumstances. These perspectives cannot be put on and off like a suit. They have to emerge and declare themselves with some urgency. Section: What post-colonial critics do. 1. They reject the claims to universalism made on behalf of canonical Western literature and seek to show its limitations of outlook, especially its general inability to empathize across boundaries of cultural and ethnic difference. 2. They examine the representation of other cultures in literature as a way of achieving this end. 3. They show how such literature is often evasively and crucially silent on matters concerned with colonization and imperialism. See, for instance, the discussion of Jane Austen's Mansfield Park in the example described below. 4. They foreground questions of cultural difference and diversity and examine their treatment in relevant literary works. 5. They celebrate hybridity and cultural polyvalency, that is, the situation whereby individuals and groups belong simultaneously to more than one culture, for instance that of the colonizer through a colonial school system and that of the colonized through local and oral traditions. 6. They develop a perspective not just applicable to post-colonial literatures, whereby states of marginality, plurality, and perceived otherness are seen as sources of energy and potential change. Section: Postcolonial Criticism and Example. Let us take the essay by Edward Said on Jane Austen's Mansfield Park, an essay rapidly achieving something of a definitive status and available in Mulhern's Mulhern's Contemporary Marxist Criticism, in Newton's Theory into Practice, in Eagleton's Raymond Williams' Critical Perspectives, and in Said's On Culture and Imperialism. Under the title Jane Austen and the Empire, Said carefully foregrounds the background of Austen's novel, which is the estate in Antigua, which Sir Thomas Bartram owns and through which the estate of Mansfield Park is maintained. Page 193. The central irony, then, is that the estate in England, which represents an ideal of order and civilization, is sustained by another estate a world away, so that Mansfield Park would not have been possible without the slave trade, sugar, and the colonial planter class. Mulhern, page 111, for as Said remarks, quote, Sir Thomas's property in the Caribbean would have had to be a sugar plantation maintained by slave labor, not abolished until the 1830s, page 106. Said thus makes central the moral geography of the novel and sees Austen as the start of a line in fiction which leads to Conrad and Kipling, in which the processes of colonization are colonialization are examined. As Mulhern puts it in his introductory note, the consequence is that the dating of British culture's imperial phase must be revised backwards from the beginning of formal empire into the 18th century, page 97. Thus, Sir Thomas, returning home and rapidly re-establishing order without ever the thought that his views and instincts could be narrow or mistaken, is the quintessential colonializing figure who takes himself as the norm of civilization. He is, says Syed, quote, a Crusoe setting things in order, stop, unquote. Nothing prevents our assuming, he says, that he, quote, does exactly the same things, dash, on a larger scale, dash, in Antigua, ... to hold and rule Mansfield Park is to hold and rule an imperial estate in association with it, stop, unquote, page 104, para. This reading involves concretizing a dimension of the novel which is largely left implicit. It involves not necessarily arguing that all these things are there in the novel, but that this is the right way to read it. All the same, Syed insists precisely that these things are there. Quote, all these things having to do with the outside brought in seem to me unmistakably there in the suggestiveness of her elusive and abstract language, unquote, stop. So Syed invokes the processes of close reading in his support, for the most part convincingly, but in the end his appeal seems to be to the conscience of the especially white and middle-class reader. Indent opens. We cannot easily say that since Mansfield Park is a novel, comma, its affiliations with a particularly sordid history are irrelevant or transcended, comma, not only because it is irresponsible to say that, comma, but because we know too much to say so without bad faith. Stop, indent closes, page 112. Para. There is, I think, no doubt about the effect of reading Syed's essay. Any innocence we might have had about this aspect of the novel goes, page 194. It is impossible henceforth to read it without a constant awareness of that absentee settler-planter who is at the center of everything in one sense and yet constantly withdrawn and marginal in another. Syed's reading likewise locates the center of the book in an absence, in things unsaid and unspecified. In this sense, it is a form of Marxist criticism influenced by post-structuralist views, contrasting with Krieger's much straighter Marxism. It also, like new historicism, comes closer to actually naming the details of a specific social/colonial situation, parenthesis, the absentee planter landlord class of 18th century Antigua, parenthesis closes, rather than just evoking a generalized notion of colonial exploitation. Section selected reading. Ashcroft, Beale and Ahluwalia, Pal. Edward Syed, Routledge 2001. A useful book in the Routledge Critical Thinkers series. Ashcroft, Beale et al., The Empire Writes Back, Theory and Practice in Postcolonial Literature, Routledge, 2nd edition, 2002. A readable and comprehensive book which provides an excellent start on this topic. Ashcroft, Beale et al., The Postcolonial Studies Reader, Routledge 1994, covers a vast range of material. Ashcroft, Beale et al., Postcolonial Studies, The Key Concept, Routledge 1998, an A to Z guide by the Empire Writes Back team. Bhabha, Homi K. E.D., Nation and Narration, Routledge 1990. A definitive early collection in this field with pieces by several of the major figures. Bhabha, Homi K., The Location of Culture, Routledge 1994. Examines, quote, the cultural and political boundaries which exist in between the spheres of gender, race, class and sexuality, stop, unquote. Discusses Morrison, Godimer and Rushdie. Not an easy writer, but says Toni Morrison, quote, any serious discussion of postcolonial/postmodern scholarship is inconceivable without referring Mr. Bhabha. Stop, unquote. Césaire, C-E-S-A-I-R-E, AIME, A-I-M-E, Return to My Native Land, Penguin Poets, 1969. This and the next title are early founding texts of postcolonialism, their status corresponding to that of classics like The Female Eunuch or The Feminine Mystic within Feminism. Fanon Franz, The Wretched of the Earth, Penguin, 1961. Getz, Henry Louis Jr., ed. Res, Writing and Difference, Chicago, 1987. Page 195. Lumba, Loomba, Ania, Colonialism/Postcolonialism, Routledge New Critical Idiom Series, 2nd edition, 2005. Another good introduction. MacLeod, John, Beginning Postcolonialism, Manchester University Press, 2nd edition, 2009. An excellent and readable book in the Beginnings series. Syed Edward, Culture and Imperialism, Vintage New Edition, 1994. A broad account of the roots of imperialism in European culture. Syed Edward, Orientalism, Penguin New Edition, 1995. Syed's work has been a major influence in this field, and he is a useful entry point since his writing has an immediate accessibility and clarity of impact. This reissue has a substantial new afterword. Spivak, Gayatri Chakravorty. In Other Worlds, Cologne, Essays in Cultural Politics, Routledge, 1987. Spivak is another major figure, but her close involvement with post-structuralism makes her writing quite demanding. A starting point might be her essay, Draupadi, on a Bengali short story which she translates and reprints in Newton's Theory into Practice. Walter Dennis, ed. Literature in the Modern World, Oxford University Press, 1990. Contains Chinua, Chinua, Achebe's paper, Colonialist Criticism, and other useful material in the relevant section.